Hey English 9, it's Mrs. Sopiarz-Rianda. I just want to review two parts or two different ideas when you are thinking about simple, compound, and complex sentences. After looking over the quiz from Unit 2, there are really two parts of that quiz that I think a lot of people got wrong. And so those are the two things that I want to cover. But before I cover that, I really wanted to explain to you the difference between a dependent and an independent clause, because these are two parts of a whole, if you want to think of it this way. Without a dependent and or an independent clause, you can't have a complete sentence. Okay, so a dependent clause is, it cannot stand on its own. Okay, it is dependent on another part of the sentence to make a complete thought. Whereas an independent clause can stand all by itself as its own sentence. Okay, so it's independent. It doesn't need anybody else, whereas a dependent does. So you have to think to yourself, and usually say it out loud. Try saying a dependent clause, and if it doesn't sound like a complete thought or a complete sentence, then it's not. It's an it's a dependent clause. Okay, so there's three different types of sentence: a simple, compound, and complex. A simple sentence has one independent clause. It can stand by itself, it has a subject, it has a predicate. Whereas a compound sentence has two independent clauses, two sentences combined together. One can stand by itself without the other. The complex sentence, I think, is where a lot of kids have trouble, because it's an independent and a dependent. Okay, so one part of it can stand by itself, but the other cannot. Okay? So here's the one part that because I said earlier there's really two things I want to focus on, and this is one of them. A lot of you got tripped up on this, and this is actually a simple sentence. It's one independent clause, and it has one subject. It has one or more subjects and predicates. Okay, so what this means is that the dog sat, independent clause, subject, predicate. The subject, the dog. Sat, predicate, right? Well, a simple sentence can also have two subjects and two predicates, or two verbs, right? So the dog and cat ate and sat. Okay, so this is still a simple sentence. You just happen to have two subjects and two verbs. Okay, so this is the first one that I really wanted to draw your attention to, because this is one that many of you got tripped up on. The other one that really threw you guys into a loop was a complex sentence, like I mentioned. Okay, and when you have one independent clause which cannot stand on its own as a sentence, and one more dependent clause which cannot stand on its own. Okay, so words like because, when, or after might indicate a complex sentence. Okay, so here's an example. When I walked downstairs, I had a big surprise. So which one is the independent clause? The independent clause that cannot stand by itself. I'm sorry, it's confusing, isn't it? The independent clause can stand by itself. It is complete thought and a complete sentence. So let's try them both out. When I walked downstairs. That is not a sentence that can stand by itself. So I know it depends on the other part of the sentence. I had a big surprise. Completely makes sense. I is the subject, had is the verb. So that is the dependent clause. I had a big surprise. That's the dependent. So this is a complex sentence. So again, words like because, when, or after might indicate a complex sentence. Okay? So those are really the two big things I want you to focus on when you review the material again and retake your quiz. If you have any questions, please let me know.